In the summer of 2004, 10-year-old me took a rather courageous step. I went off to an overnight summer camp for the first time. I actually didn't struggle at all from being separated from my family. As soon as I got dropped off, I said goodbye to my folks and didn't even think of them for 3.5 weeks. That was a joke, of course. I easily won the award for the most homesick child in the history of that camp, or any camp, to be frank. To this day, my mother seldom misses an opportunity to bring up the tear-stained letters I mailed home communicating my homesickness. However, eventually, somehow, my anxiety calmed, and I ended up proudly embracing the community and made a bunch of close friends along the way, some of which I'm still in contact with. Shout out to Ezra Goldstein and Jacob Schneider. Anyways, one of many memories that stuck with me from that summer was Counselor David's stereo. He blasted that thing every day after breakfast when we would clean the bunk. There was one song in particular he would play. I'm not sure if he played it just once or a couple of times or every goddamn day, but my goodness was it catchy. And when I say it was catchy, I'm referring just to the first two lines of the chorus, because I honestly didn't remember a single other part of the song. Regardless, I never thought to ask David the name of the song or the artist or any of that. So for the next 4 years, the lines, quote, "Take a shower, shine your shoes, you got no time to lose," lived rent-free in my head. However, in the summer of 2008, my cool older friend Jason from Atlanta for some reason was visiting the Orlando area, and he was kind enough to pay me a visit. He was 16 and had just gotten his license and thus picked me up, and we went to the Teenagers' Natural Habitat, otherwise known as the mall. On the way on Primera Boulevard in Lake Mary, we were listening to a playlist he presumably had burned onto a blank CD because, again, it was 2008. Anyways, this cute little folk rock song started playing, and when it got to the chorus, I heard the two elusive lines of, quote, "Take a picture, shine your shoes, you got no time to lose." I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I said, "Oh my god, I remember this song from camp." He was like, "Cool, yeah, Dove." He didn't match my level of excitement, but whatever, I'm not mad about it. I asked him the questions I should have asked David 4 years prior. He told me the song's title was The General, and the artist was Dispatch. So I said nice, and then I went on with my life and didn't worry too much about that particular artist or song. That's a joke again, obviously. I immediately explored their discography, and my fandom of their music, of course, became like 95% of my personality. To give you a quick background of the band, in their heyday in the latter half of the 90s, they were a three-piece folk rock band from Boston that became the face of independent music when their shows were selling out despite poor album sales due to the presence of Napster. All three members sang, wrote lyrics, and played multiple instruments. The voice, though, most associated with the band probably would be singer-songwriter Chad Urmston, better known by his stage name Chad Stokes. Dispatch parted ways in 2004 and wouldn't reunite until 2011. During the fall of 2009, I was just chit-chatting with my buddy Ari Miller about music and asked him if he liked Dispatch. He told me he was a big fan and suggested that I check out the band State Radio, which was Chad Stokes' project at the time. I, of course, gladly accepted his advice. He lent me all three of the band's CDs and I was hooked. At the time, I had been exploring reggae music and started getting interested in politics, so the fact that State Radio infused rock with reggae and wrote about political matters of both past and present appealed mightily to me. In one of the albums that Ari burned for me, it had something like 30 songs. The first 10 or so were recorded in the studio, but the rest of the album came from a solo concert that Chad Stokes played to raise money for his charity foundation called Calling All Crows. During a performance on that album of the song Gunship Politico, at the conclusion of the nearly 6-minute brilliant anti-police brutality tune, Stokes abruptly changed the key of the song and transitioned into a song that right off the bat matched Gunship Politico's intensity and magnitude. Before he started singing this unfamiliar tune, Stokes said, quote, "We're going to go back to the mid-90s. Pretty sure this is the last time we're going to do this for a long time." When he finally began singing, I was absolutely blown away by the lyrics, the passion, and the vocal inflections. Now, since Ari burned the CD for me, I didn't have the ability to merely look at the back of the album to see the name of this cover. However, it was now 2010 and the term Google it was ubiquitous, so I simply looked up the lyrics. I discovered not only the name of the song and band, but also that the song and the band were, to quote President Biden, a big fucking deal. I listened to the original version of the song that Stokes had covered, and my goodness, it was far more powerful than I could have imagined. That all said, I found the name of the band to be a bit silly. I mean, what serious band names themselves after a fruit? I'm Dov Brenner, and this is Hotcakes from a 90s Stand. Today we're going back to the British Isles, so I can ask the question, what is the Cranberries' signature song? In 1989, in Limerick, Ireland, brothers Noel and Mike Hogan and their friend Fergal Lawler were all teenagers and good buds who spent their free time breakdancing and listening to rock bands like The Cure and The Smiths. The trio decided to form a band, with Mike Hogan on the bass, Noel Hogan on the guitar, and Fergal Lawler on the skins. The band quickly recruited local singer Niall Quinn, who had garnered a name for himself around Limerick as the singer for a group called Hitchers. The band initially gave themselves the quirky indie pop name of the Cranberries Saw Us, a pun on cranberry sauce, the popular holiday dish in the US, Canada, and UK. In January of 1990, the band released their first demo titled Anything. It was the first and only bit of material ever recorded with Niall Quinn, because shortly after its release, Quinn left the band to focus exclusively on his work with the Hitchers. Perhaps driven by guilt or just because he was a decent dude, Quinn helped his ex-bandmates find a new singer. He suggested his girlfriend's older sister's friend, Dolores O'Riordan. O'Riordan, 18 years old at the time, was the youngest of a big Catholic family from a rural outskirt of Limerick. She had been known within her tight-knit community for her powerful vocals in which she refused to compromise her Irish accent. Attending an Irish national school, she took all her classes in Gaelic and became immersed in Irish culture. So it was no surprise that when she auditioned for the Cranberries Saw Us on a Sunday afternoon in the middle of 1990, she opted to sing the song Troy by Dublin-based singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor. Apparently, the band struggled to hear her vocals because the mic she sang into was transmitted through a guitar amp. That said, whatever they heard seemed good enough to give O'Riordan a recording of an instrumental track they were working on. O'Riordan came back with lyrics and a melody the following week and blew the band away. That song would wind up blowing the world away too, but we'll get to that later. Needless to say, the band welcomed O'Riordan to the group with open arms. The Cranberries Saw Us, then started quickly recording demos and sent them out to record labels. One record label sent back the demo tape addressed simply to the Cranberries. The quartet liked the name and thus officially changed their name to the Cranberries. In April of 1991, after having already released multiple EPs with O'Riordan on vocals, the Cranberries played a show at the University of Limerick as part of their Rag Week. For those of you not familiar with Rag Week, it's an annual event in the United Kingdom and Ireland where universities hold a bunch of events to raise money for charities. Attendance for that show exceeded 1,400, and in the crowd was well-known producer and A&R rep for Island Records, Danny Cornell. That performance, in combination with their well-received performance on the Irish radio program, The Dave Fanning Show, led to Island Records signing the Cranberries to a 10-year, 6-album deal in the summer of 1991. Apparently, the deal wasn't particularly lucrative, but gave the band autonomy over the pacing of the producing of their records. According to Pitchfork, as the band began to gain traction in the European media, O'Riordan became the mouthpiece of the band and endeared herself to the public, becoming sort of an everywoman, as she was timid, unfamiliar with a lot of music equipment terminology, and passionate about her Catholic faith. In 1992, Jeff Travis, the founder of Rough Trade Records, became manager of the Cranberries. This was especially significant because it was Rough Trade that signed their biggest influence, the Smiths, in 1983 and produced all the studio albums of their brief career. Also, in 1992, the band teamed up with English producer Stephen Street to work on their debut LP. A perfect match for the Cranberries because he had already made a name for himself, producing for well-known acts from the British Isles such as Morrissey, Blur, the Psychedelic Furs, and you guessed it, the Smiths. Also, side note, I had no idea if the Psychedelic Furs were well known. I just thought their name was funny. Anyways, the band recorded the majority of their debut album in 1992 at Windmill Lane Studios in Dublin, Ireland, with a few recorded at Surrey Studios in Surrey, England. On March 1st, 1993, the Cranberries released their first studio album. They're sarcastically titled Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We? Sounds like a blend of The Smiths, The Cure, and Irish folk. The adjective that gets thrown around the most to describe the album seems to be ethereal. I find this to be accurate. Between Noel Hogan's guitar tone and chord choices in combination with Dolores O'Riordan's soothing yet somehow piercing vocals, a beautifully emotional sound emerges on Everyone Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We? The album became a success in both their home country of Ireland, where it peaked at number 1, as well as overseas, cracking the top 20 in Australia, Canada, and the United States. To date, the album has sold over 8.5 million copies worldwide, with almost 6 million copies purchased in the US alone. The album spawned 2 generationally successful singles, Dreams and Linger. The latter was the tune I alluded to earlier that O'Riordan crafted for her second audition. Both contemporarily as well as retrospectively, the album is held in high esteem. Upon release, Tom Sinclair of Entertainment Weekly awarded the album a grade of B, praising the band as the, quote, quiet storm music for the alternative rock generation. Mario Munoz of the LA Times gave Everyone Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We 3 out of 4 stars and compared O'Riordan's voice to the legendary Joni Mitchell and praised the instrumentalist's, quote, ethereal presence with Celtic-flavored folk tinged with gospel sensibilities. And who can forget our good friend Robin Christgau? He very much liked the record, giving it a grade of A-. He praised the album in his own special way, commenting, quote, every song diddles your beauty spot. In the midst of relentless touring to support their breakout debut album, the band did not hesitate in writing songs for their follow-up album. For Dolores O'Riordan, there was plenty of material to work with. She used the tumult in dealing with both a recent painful breakup and her newfound fame as inspiration for her lyrical compositions. In addition, she discussed socio-political issues in her writing. I promise you I will revisit that last sentence in detail. Anyways, in November of 1993, the Cranberries headed back to the studio to begin recording that follow-up record. While they recorded in multiple locations, the majority of the LP found the band working at the Manor in Oxford, England. The drummer Fergal Lawler said of the recording process, quote, we were having a ball because we were in our early 20s and just really enjoying ourselves. If the Manor in Oxford sounds familiar, it was mentioned on the podcast's 8th episode, as it is the location where Radiohead recorded The Bends. Adhering to the cliche, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, the band opted to regroup with Stephen Street to produce the album. The Cranberries released their second studio album, No Need to Argue, on October 3, 1994. While much of the album echoes the ethereal pop rock vibes of its predecessor, the record certainly also provides a darker presence both lyrically and instrumentally. The influence of grunge absolutely made its way to the Irish Quartet, as certain songs sound much more like the Seattle grunge bands than the Smiths. For example, No Need to Argue's ninth song, Ridiculous Thoughts, is quite reminiscent of Jeremy by Pearl Jam. The album became a cultural phenomenon in the Western world. Supported by 4 hit singles, the record peaked at number 1 in Australia, Austria, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, New Zealand, Spain, and Sweden. But not in Ireland somehow. It was kind of weird, but... While the album didn't hit number 1 in the US, it charted 12 positions higher than its predecessor, peaking at number 6. To date, the album has sold nearly 18 million copies, making it the band's highest selling album. While consumers obviously seemed to enjoy No Need to Argue, critics tended to appear far more mixed. On the positive side, Mark Caro of the Chicago Tribune gave the album 3 out of 4 stars and praised their new grungy direction without, quote, an abandonment of the band's wispy qualities. Stephen Thomas Erlewine of AllMusic awarded No Need to Argue 4 out of 5 stars. Erlewine's sentiments regarding the overlap between the band's first 2 albums echoed Caro's review. Aside from that, the vocals on the record especially impressed Erlewine. He stated, quote, most of the credit goes to the gutsy, beautiful singing of Dolores O'Riordan, who manages to squeeze emotion out of even the most mundane lyrics. On the negative side, Whiff Stenger of Rolling Stone graded the album a meager 2.5 stars out of 5. He likened the album to, quote, tea steeped too long or porter gone sour. Whatever the fuck that means. Following their 2 blockbuster successes of the early 90s, the band wanted a producer to match their status. So they ditched Stephen Street in favor of Bruce Fairbairn. Fairbairn had produced perhaps the most iconic hard rock albums of the late 80s and early 90s, most notably Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi, Aerosmith's Permanent Vacation, and The Razor's Edge by AC/DC. To date, those 3 albums have sold altogether north of 54 million copies worldwide. So in November of 1995, the Cranberries returned to the Windmill Studios in Dublin, where they had recorded their debut mega-successful album. Heartbreak was baked into the foundation of the album, as both Denny Cornell, the producer and A&R rep who discovered the Cranberries, as well as Joe O'Riordan, Dolores' grandfather, passed away in the year 1995. The band recorded the vast majority of the album in just 2 months. The Cranberries released their 3rd studio album, To the Faithful Departed, on April 22, 1996. While the record certainly featured the heaviest presence of rock and post-punk within their discography up to that point, kudos to Fairbairn, as the ethereal pop rock sound that endeared the band to the masses managed to find its way on To the Faithful Departed. That all said, the spirit of the album does feel like a discontinuation from its 2 predecessors. That overall change perhaps lends itself to the songwriting. In their previous 2 albums, about 64% of the songs had been co-written by O'Riordan and Hogan. However, on To the Faithful Departed, only 3 of the 13 songs, at least on the US edition, included Hogan in the songwriting. Lyrically, O'Riordan continues to utilize a mix of social commentary and personal matters. The name of the album perhaps is derived from the many fallen heroes mentioned on the record, including Joe O'Riordan and Denny Cordell, as well as esteemed public figures Kurt Cobain and John F. Kennedy from across the pond. The LP springboarded off the success of its predecessors, becoming another blockbuster hit across the West, well, at least initially. To the Faithful Departed hit number 1 in Austria, Belgium, Italy, Ireland, and Sweden. In the US, the album peaked at number 4 and went twice platinum. While the album only sold a fraction of No Need to Argue, to date the record has sold over 6 million copies, and according to bestsellingalbums.org, it is the 27th highest selling album of '96, outselling iconic records that came out that year, such as Evil Empire by Rage Against the Machine and Nas's It Was Written. The Cranberries supported the album with 4 singles, 2 of which peaked in the top 40 in the US, and another that topped the rock charts. That said, the album failed to have the type of generation-defining hit present on their predecessors. Critics were once again mixed in their review of a Cranberries release. On the positive side, Neil Z. Ying of AllMusic awarded the album 4 out of 5 stars, praising the manner in which the musicianship supports the emotional heaviness of the lyrical content. He said of the Cranberries' third album that it, quote, could be considered the most well-executed and thoughtful album in their catalog. Once again hating on the band, Rolling Stone gave the album 2 stars out of 5. The reviewer Lorraine Ali brutally summarized the record. Quote, "There's no doubt that this band, or at least O'Riordan, has conviction, but the group's approach is so clumsy, the album is ultimately as insubstantial as a bowl of dry crunch berries." Ouch. Though if y'all allow me to throw in my 2 cents, after a few listens, I would say that I agree wholeheartedly with the review from Edna Gunderson of USA Today, who gave the album 2.5 stars out of 4. While she praised Fairbairn's production, she criticized O'Riordan's songwriting. Like Lorraine Ali, Gunderson pulls no punches, lampooning O'Riordan's approach to songwriting, opining, quote, "If only Dolores O'Riordan could turn down the vocal hysterics and pen a lyric that doesn't deteriorate into sentimental cliches and wide-eyed moralizing." Following the release of their 3rd studio album, the band departed for their tour to support the record. They dubbed it the Free to Decide Tour, named after the album's 2nd single. However, the band canceled the remainder of the North American leg of the tour in September of 1996 due to the deterioration of O'Riordan's health. The singer discussed the need to cancel the tour due to the fact that between writing and recording and touring, the band hadn't had a real break since before their debut album. She said on top of that, her status as an A-list celebrity led to the press's intrusion into her life. Those combined factors led to mental health issues, including insomnia, anorexia, and alcoholism. O'Riordan wasn't the only utterly exhausted member of the Cranberries. During the tour, Noel Hogan became increasingly concerned with his singer's health issues and stated, quote, "I just wanted the whole thing to stop, but none of us wanted to be the first to speak up and stop all the madness, so we were relieved when Dolores made the first move." Thus, the band took a much-deserved hiatus in which several members experienced personal triumphs. Dolores O'Riordan and her husband, Don Burton, the former tour manager of Duran Duran, had their first child named Taylor, while both Mike Hogan and Fergal Lawler got married. After their year plus of a break, O'Riordan and Noel Hogan reunited to start writing. The band then headed back into the studio in 1998 to record their 4th studio album with Benedict Fenner at the helm as producer. Fenner had garnered recognition for mixing the vast majority of Laid, the 1993 critically successful album by Mancunian pop rock band James. The Cranberries recorded in Canada, France, Ireland, and England. Fenner did a fine job in finding a happy medium between the ethereal pop texture of their first record and the grittier rock sound found in large quantities in their 2nd and 3rd albums. Almost 3 years to the date of their previous release, the Cranberries released their 4th studio album, Bury the Hatchet, on April 19, 1999. According to O'Riordan, the title of the album summed up how the band was feeling collectively following their tour debacle and subsequent hiatus. Bury the Hatchet is certainly a cohesive product that overall sounds like a power pop record, of course not without the Cranberries' famous Irish folk flavor. Lyrically, the album largely evades the social commentary found on their previous efforts, instead focusing on O'Riordan's personal matters, especially motherhood. The album also saw the band return to the majority of the songwriting being conducted in tandem between O'Riordan and Noel Hogan. The album sold fairly well and also charted decently. Bury the Hatchet topped the albums chart in Canada, Germany, Spain, and Switzerland. That said, the album proved to be their most underwhelming in the British Isles up to that point. In the UK and Ireland, the album peaked at number 7 and 4, respectively. To date, the LP has sold north of 3 million copies, not too shabby, but signaling the end of their commercial and cultural heyday. Of their 4 singles, only Promises had any real international success. However, none of the singles from Bury the Hatchet did nearly anything on the US charts. Critics viewed the record with, you guessed it, mixed reviews. On the positive side, our friend Stephen Thomas Erlewine of AllMusic awarded the album 3.5 out of 5 stars. He gave an interesting review, criticizing heavily To the Faithful Departed, which led into praise for Bury the Hatchet. While he didn't find it to be their best record, he did call the album their most consistent effort. He praised their, quote, mid-tempo, folky pop tunes with polished productions. On the negative side, Chris William of Entertainment Weekly eviscerated the album with a scathing review. He gave the album a grade of D. He was especially harsh on O'Riordan. He lambasted her lyrics, calling them, quote, near nursery rhymes that occasionally veer into the subliterate. Of all people, though, Rolling Stone kind of finally came around to a post-debut Cranberries album. While author Arian Berger graded Bury the Hatchet with a modest 3 out of 5 stars, his words were more laudatory. He stated that the record, quote, gives in to their solid melodic instincts once and for all. After giving a nearly track-by-track analysis, Berger ended his review with an endearing compliment, quote, these youthful old pros have never sounded more winning or unified. While they wouldn't officially break up for another 20 years, I'm basically done with their history for a couple of reasons. Number one, despite what I may or may not have said to Ella Hyder last time, this is a 90s music history podcast, so I would like to focus on their work in that decade. And number two, there really isn't too much to discuss about their time in the 21st century. Okay, that's kind of a lie. They put out another album in 2001 on a different label. The record, Wake Up and Smell the Coffee, did garner quite a bit of praise, but commercially paled in comparison to even Bury the Hatchet. In 2003, the band took a 6-year hiatus. They reunited in 2009 for a world tour. They then released 2 albums, Roses in 2012 and Something Else in 2017. While neither album did much commercially, the latter received a good deal of praise. In the media, though, their music in the 2010s was overshadowed by O'Riordan's personal tumult, which I won't discuss other than to mention that throughout that decade she was not in a good place. On January 15th, 2018, Dolores O'Riordan was found dead in her hotel room in London. Apparently she had drowned due to alcohol intoxication. The band poetically honored her with the release of their final album, aptly titled In the End. While the incorporation of O'Riordan's vocals on the album rested purely on demo recordings, the rest of the Cranberries were able to record their parts business as usual. The instrumentalists' studio process commenced following O'Riordan's funeral, which they used to capture their emotions and use them as inspiration for the record. The album became their biggest critical success since their debut and their biggest commercial success in the British Isles in over 20 years. Prior to the release of the album, Noel Hogan stated, quote, the Cranberries was the 4 of us. We don't want to do this without Dolores, so we're going to leave it after this. Thus, after the release of the album, the Cranberries officially retired. I refuse to end the history portion of this episode on a somber note. Instead, I again want to praise Dolores O'Riordan as one of the greatest singers in rock history and communicate her legacy. Artists influenced by O'Riordan include Hot Cakes alum Alanis Morissette, as well as Adele, Arcade Fire, Florence and the Machine, Halsey, and Foster the People. Anyways, now that we have a pretty good understanding of the band's history, it's time to ask the sacred question. What is the Cranberries' signature song? As has been tradition in all signature song monologues, I made a 10-song anthology of the most streamed songs by the Cranberries on Spotify. As fate would have it, each of the 4 albums I discuss in length are represented, and all 10 songs were recorded and released in the 90s. While there exists tons of diversity within the Cranberries' discography, it doesn't take a music nerd like myself to notice the stylistic overlap found across this anthology, giving us the band's signature sound. On the lyrical side, Okay, timeout. I'm going to say something negative. Don't worry, my guest in just a bit will scold me for this comment, but I did not find Dolores O'Riordan to be an impressive lyricist. That said, she was very consistent. The vast majority of the songs on the anthology were written about her personal life, in which she was very open about her experiences. In addition, her lyrics tend to focus on relationships, whether they be romantic, platonic, or familial. Additionally, she tends to reflect frequently on her past. In terms of the music, a lot of unique factors characterize the Cranberries' signature sound. Vocally, I noticed that O'Riordan often does two distinct vocal stylings. One is the yodel. We talked about the yodel back when we did the Alanis Morissette episode. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Morissette herself was inspired to incorporate that form of singing from O'Riordan, but I digress. In case you don't remember, according to Google, yodeling is a form of singing or calling marked by rapid alternation between the normal voice and falsetto. O'Riordan also frequently utilizes non-lexical vocables in her singing. Instead of giving you a definition, I'll just give examples. When Tom DeLonge sang na 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 in All the Small Things, or when Kylie Minogue opened her 2001 earworm Can't Get You Out of My Head with la 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 la. Those are both textbook uses of non-lexical vocables. In addition, O'Riordan tended to record very pleasant vocal harmonies. Instrumentally, it also appears that the Cranberries love to include very ethereal electric guitar in their songs, and they liked often to layer their guitar work with acoustic guitar strumming. The other thing instrumentally I noticed was the heavy incorporation of orchestral arrangements. All of these different factors that I just mentioned make for very pretty tunes. So I'm thinking the signature Cranberries song would have to be written from O'Riordan's personal experiences about her past and the relationship she developed. Vocally, the song would have to include non-lexical vocables, harmonies, as well as the yodel. Instrumentally, the song would have to feature both ethereal electric guitar as well as a palpable acoustic guitar part and a prominent orchestral arrangement. Finally, the song has to be pretty. While that last part is subjective, I think if you spend 15 minutes listening to the Cranberries' greatest hits, you'd agree they produce some of the prettiest songs. Anyways, it was not too difficult at all, really, to find a significant song within their discography that fit those criteria. I will say, though, their signature song may not be what you expect. I could have picked Animal Instinct, the opening track and second single from their fourth studio album, Bury the Hatchet. While the song was only a moderate hit upon release, it currently has received nearly 95 million streams on Spotify, and its music video has nearly 100 million hits on YouTube. Not bad for a single that didn't even chart in the US or Ireland. In the radio-friendly folk rock tune, Dolores O'Riordan reflects on her recent pregnancy and the subsequent birth of her first child, Taylor. The song's title refers to O'Riordan's super protective maternal instinct that she discovered upon the birth of her child. Despite sounding like a far cry from their early work, the influence from The Cure is loud and clear, especially during the guitar solo at the end of the song, reminiscent of the lead guitar found in Just Like Heaven from The Cure's 1987 album, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. While the catchy song does include a bunch of vintage characteristics of the Cranberries, especially via the instrumentals such as ethereal electric guitar, acoustic guitar, and orchestral presence, etc., the vocals were pretty straightforward, without any O'Riordanisms, if you will. So without yodels or non-lexical vocables, Animal Instinct has to be without the title of signature song. I could have picked Dreams, the first single from their first studio album. Everybody else is doing it, so why can't we? Released in 1993. As I mentioned in the intro, I discovered the Cranberries in high school, and of all the three most popular songs by them on iTunes at the time, this was the only one I recognized. I have a lot of memories growing up, driving with my mom on the Taconic Parkway in the Hudson Valley with the song blasting on the radio. The song became a major international hit and exploded the band onto the mainstream. The single became a top 40 hit in over 10 countries and performed well in the US, peaking at number 42 on the Billboard Hot 100. Currently, Dreams possesses roughly 475 million streams on Spotify, and its music video has received over 273 million plays. Another song from the vault of O'Riordan's life experiences, the song details the first time that the singer fell in love. It's a very sweet song depicting the euphoria of young love. I think most would agree with me that this song ranks perhaps as one of their most ethereal tunes. In the song, Noel Hogan plays soothing chords in a spacious manner, allowing for his brother, Mike, to drive the song with a thumping bass line, accentuated by Fergal Lawler's hard-hitting drums. Dolores O'Riordan's vocals are incredibly heartfelt and features one of the most intense examples of her yodeling occurring during the bridge. Also, the tune is not without some gnarly non-lexical vocables. Thus, Dream certainly makes a compelling case for the title of signature song. However, the lack of a noticeable acoustic guitar part and no sign of an orchestral arrangement unfortunately took it out of the running for the esteemed title. Super pretty song though. For my first hot take of the episode, I could have picked, but didn't, Linger, the second single from their debut album. The iconic, beautiful, and soothing indie pop tune quickly became a cultural phenomenon in the West. The song peaked in the top 10 in Canada, Iceland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Scotland, and the US. Speaking of the US, Linger became their only top 10 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. With over 740 million streams on Spotify and 474 million hits on YouTube, Linger clearly has stood the test of time amongst 90s aficionados and fans of the Cranberries alike. To pen the song, it again appears that O'Riordan borrowed from her personal experiences. She said that the song stemmed from the feeling of heartbreak, of loving somebody, but it's not reciprocated. It also seems that her love interest in the song may have cheated on her, with the lines at the end of the first stanza, quote, "And I swore I would be true, and honey, so did you. So why were you holding her hand? Is that the way we stand? Were you lying all the time? Was it just a game to you?" In true Cranberries fashion, the song gives off hella ethereal vibes. And of perhaps any song within the anthology, the orchestral arrangement is most prominent in Linger. In addition, the strong presence of O'Riordan's acoustic guitar playing adds a fantastic balance between all the guitar parts, which include a dope-ass slide guitar part from Noel Hogan during the tune's second half. Other cool things going on in the song include Fergal Lawler carrying the beat on the snare drum with what sounds like brushes. It's also worth mentioning during the choruses there's a beautifully haunting falsetto vocal in the background. While all these parts come together to form a generationally successful and beloved heartbreak anthem, I was shocked and heartbroken myself to come to determine that O'Riordan doesn't yodel in the song, nor does she include her famous non-lexical vocables. So when I started this episode, I was so sure Linger would receive the crown. Becoming aware of those two missing features, I have no choice but to move on to the next runner-up. For my second and perhaps most controversial hot take of the episode, I could have picked, but of course did not, Zombie, the lead single from the 1994 studio album, No Need to Argue. While the Cranberries certainly don't hail from the state of Washington, the tune is unabashedly a grunge song. It actually reminds me quite a bit of the song Outshined by Soundgarden from Badmotorfinger. The song exploded onto the international mainstream in the same way, if not to a greater extent, as Linger did the previous year. Zombie topped the singles charts in 7 countries and peaked in the top 10 in an additional 10 countries. While the song didn't chart on the Billboard Hot 100, it became their first single to hit number 1 on the US rock charts. More than the vast majority of their contemporaries, this song has aged like fine wine. The music video for Zombie has garnered over 1.5 billion hits, and on Spotify it possesses north of 1.24 billion streams, making it the 16th most streamed song from the 90s and the 4th most streamed grunge song ever, behind only Smells Like Teen Spirit and Come As You Are by Nirvana and Radiohead's Creep. Not too shabby for a band seldomly labeled with that genre. The song remains one of only a couple within the anthology that don't originate from O'Riordan's personal experience, but rather the song was written as socio-political commentary. O'Riordan wrote Zombie about the conflict between Northern Ireland and England, often referred to as the Troubles. She wrote it in response to the 1993 terrorist attack in Warrington, England, that killed 2 children and was carried out by the Irish Republican Army, referred to as the IRA. In the song, O'Riordan wanted to make clear that she wasn't taking sides in the conflict, conceptually speaking, but rather was taking a stance against the killing of innocents. If you hadn't put 2 and 2 together, it was a cover of this song by State Radio that made me aware of the Cranberries. Anyways, as I mentioned, this song diverges quite a bit from the musical style they had been known for at the time. Noel Hogan's aggressive strums over his distortion-filled guitar, Mike Hogan's thumping bass line, Fergal Lawler's pounding drums, and Dolores O'Riordan's haunting lead guitar form the nucleus of the powerful alt-rock tune. But as per usual, it's O'Riordan's vocals that steal the show. She put her yodeling front and center, including it at the end of each chorus when listeners inevitably are focused most. She also inserts some of her most intense non-lexical vocables at the song's peak in intensity following the second chorus. My favorite part of the song occurs at around the 4-minute mark, when it sounds as if the tune is just about to end. The Cranberries indulge themselves in a rare minute-long explosive jam. So obviously Zombie is an incredible song. I'd be foolish to argue otherwise. However, so little about this aligns with the Cranberries' signature sound. And I'm sorry, but while this may be one of the all-time great grunge songs, since you can't really associate the Irish Quartet with that subgenre, I can't really define Zombie as the Cranberries' signature song. Before I reveal my pick for the Cranberries' signature song, I want to share a quick story. When I was in my third year of college, I took a class on Earth systems to fulfill my natural sciences requirement. I remember learning that the Earth is referred to as a quote-unquote Goldilocks planet because its conditions are just right to support the existence of life. I mention this because as I listened and analyzed the anthology of Cranberries songs, I noticed only one existed that could be considered the Goldilocks song, meaning it had just the right amount of characteristics to support its coronation of the grand honor of this podcast. So without further ado, the signature song of the Cranberries easily goes to Ode to My Family, the opening track from No Need to Argue. While it didn't gain the chart success of Zombie or Linger, the tune performed very well throughout the West. Ode to My Family charted in the top 20 in Australia, Belgium, France, Iceland, Ireland, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and Scotland. The song remains amongst their most popular tunes, with 195 million plays on YouTube and over 266 million streams on Spotify. Once again, stemming from O'Riordan's personal experiences, the tune's meaning is pretty self-explanatory. O'Riordan explained that Ode to My Family is, quote, about childhood, family, and how important they are. The lyrics are simple, but O'Riordan writes from the heart, and you can feel the power of her emotions towards her humble upbringing. I will say, I noticed a certain element of nostalgia within the song, as if she's intentionally conveying that she's writing this from the perspective of someone whose life constantly finds itself under the microscope. That sentiment is reflected in the second verse when she states, quote, understand what I've become. It wasn't my design, and people everywhere think something better than I am. As pretty as the song's heartfelt content is, the rest of the band matches the aesthetic with a brilliant instrumental performance. Every endearing quality central to the Cranberries' signature sound can be found in Ode to My Family's tender 4.5 minutes. The song opens with Dolores O'Riordan singing the non-lexical vocable, do 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 do. She's quickly joined by soft acoustic chords and ethereal electric guitar. Throughout the first verse, vocal harmonies, arpeggiated electric guitar, and a minimalist percussive approach fill the space. As the song enters the chorus, so do the yodels. Her yodeling on the second syllable of the words mother and father is especially symbolic and powerful given the song's message. As the song turns to the second verse, violin joins the tune, making the pretty song even prettier. As the song further progresses, the orchestral section gets bigger before it gets louder in Ode to My Family's final minute. In fact, I'd say in that final minute, which essentially serves as an outro, the only component of the song that takes up more compositional weight than the orchestra is Dolores O'Riordan's singing of that non-lexical vocable. So on the lyrical side, not only does it borrow from O'Riordan's personal experiences, but it conveys the power of multiple relationships. And with her singing, every vocal element of the Cranberries' signature sound is not only there, but it's palpable. The yodels, the harmonies, the non-lexical vocables, they don't hide. They're out in the open for listeners to bask in. And of course, the instrumentals, the ethereal guitar chords, the arpeggiated electric lead, the soft yet significant acoustic guitar strumming, and orchestral arrangement. They're all intertwined to enable O'Riordan to showcase to the world one of the top vocal performances of her incredible yet too short career. Thus, it's without any doubts that Ode to My Family more than clearly is the Cranberries' signature song. I introduced myself to my guest today in the fall of 2011. It took a while for us to be friends because he's introverted as hell, but he has since been one of my closest friends. And oh, by the way, he was my right-hand man for my rock opera. He's a great guy, minus the weird thing he has for fences. Please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Zachary Natale.
Dove, pleasure to be here. Though I have to say, I have to chide you a little bit because I mentioned the rock opera bit to some of your bandmates and they had no recollection of that. So I don't know what happened. Did you tell them that or what?
We don't talk.
Fair.
Yeah. I tried talking, they're like, Dev, you're the drummer. You're meant to be like heard sometimes. And not
Fair.
and not and not seen. That's why you're behind your fucking drum set, so we can't hear you.
You're not the Pete
Or
Townsend.
can't see you. I'm sorry. You can definitely hear me. Yeah. But yeah, man. And so just for our listeners know, Zach, he was so kind enough. He lives in Florida, but he came up a couple weeks ago to visit me. And we were gonna record the episode then, but of course I was not ready because I was, being lazy or whatever, who knows. But we had such a great time, and also Zach's a great singer, by the way. That's the last compliment I'll give you, Zach. Okay.
That's all I deserve. I mean,
Yeah.
if
If that. But anyway, so I'm sure because you are one of my, in addition to being a close friend, you are a great listener of this podcast. So you're probably aware that the first three questions I'm going to ask you, I always ask when I have a new guest on. I was trying to think about because you and I have talked quite a bit about music over the years, but I was trying to think if I could answer any of these questions, and I don't really think I can. But first question, what music have you been listening to most recently?
yeah, it's an interesting question actually, because I feel like, when we spent the most time together in college, I've kind of almost reverted back to listening to that music after having a bit of a sojourn into other stuff.
So the Spice Girls?
Absolutely, Spice Girls, Backstreet Boys,
Hmm.
just all the
Yeah.
classics. Um, yeah, so I've kind of gotten back into some of the sort of 2010s indie music like MGMT. I don't know if you call them indie, but Cage Elephant as well. Back in college, I was a huge Iggy Pop fan. I've been kind of digging up some of his stuff again with the Stooges. Um, on top of that, for more modern stuff, a lot of Hozier, Tyler Childers, which I mentioned to you before, Zach Bryan. Um,
Oh, Zach Bryan, my guy.
so, and one really good Bob Dylan album in particular called Desire, which is my personal favorite. Great songwriting. So yeah, a bit of that. Also some 90s hip hop, Lauryn Hill, Fugees, Arrested Development. So kind of variety there.
I love how eclectic that mix is, and it's definitely a lot of that I do remember, like not only listening to it with you in college, but just hearing it kind of everywhere, like especially Cage the Elephant and MGMT. MGMT was a big deal. I completely forgot about them, but they were like all the rage for a few years.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think Oracular Spectacular became really big like when we actually started college. I remember hearing them a ton like during the orientation parties and everything. And yeah, I just got into them like right before going to college, so it kind of worked out perfectly.
But
But yeah,
I think it's gonna work. Didn't Oracular Spectacular like come out like in like 2008 or 2009 or something like that?
it came out
But
before you it picked up like I think
yeah,
probably we were going to college
I
though.
feel like it was a slow burn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a slow burn.
Yeah. What music were you spoon-fed as a child?
So this is really funny. As you mentioned, I'm definitely listening to this podcast, and I think there are a lot of similarities between other guests and I. My parents were sort of from the younger boomer generation, so I was exposed to just copious amounts of Billy Joel, Springsteen, Van Morrison, Santana, Fleetwood Mac. Um, Probably not appropriate for when I was a child, but my dad played me a lot of the Velvet Underground and Lou Reed, which I also happen to love. So definitely a lot of stuff from like the, late 60s, 70s, maybe some early 80s for Springsteen as well.
Yeah. I feel like that was like the golden age for like singer-songwriters.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. And I mean, they stick. It's funny. I mean, I think that I still listen to a lot of that stuff now. But I have to say, if I listen to two decades in particular, it's probably like the 70s and the 90s. So perfect fit, I suppose.
Two best decades for music.
You got it.
Yeah, with 60s at number three for me. But when did you first start discovering music on your own?
So I'm gonna bury part of this answer for another question that I have here because I think it's relevant. But I think the first like real musical memory I had, my parents always played music and I liked it, but I never really engaged with it very much, like on my own. Probably until Demon Days by the Gorillaz came out.
Oh,
Um,
that's Castillo's gonna hear that and he's gonna get so excited. He
yeah,
loves the Gorillas.
oh, they're incredible. They're absolutely incredible. I also like Blur a lot too. Um, but yeah, I think when Feel Good Inc. came out, that was like the first song that had like the earworm effect on me, where like I remember very specifically, I heard it during the summer. I was in New Jersey with some family members and we were out like tubing on a lake. And I kept on like repeating, the chorus of it, because I was so terrified of falling off of the tube. So it was my comfort sort of song. So I think that was the big one. After that, probably Dookie by Green Day. And I mean, just a fantastic album. A lot of MCR because, millennial and probably my introduction
You
to
you were you were into My Chemical Romance? I didn't know that.
I love them. Yeah, I mean, I think I got into them right when Black Parade came out. It was so theatrical and ridiculous, but I mean, just I still just kind of belt the song sometimes in my car. I mean, it's just incredible music, in my opinion.
Oh,
Uh,
the guitar player is insane.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then I think the introduction to like more like the 70s stuff, like especially in terms of like guitar work, I mean Hendrix was a huge one for me
Oh
at
yeah.
12,
Oh my
13.
God. That's the artist I think that I need to kind of rediscover a little bit because I used to be such a Hendrix fan, but I just haven't really like taken the time to listen to him in so long. But he has, in addition to those three miraculously brilliant, studio albums while he was alive, he has so much other stuff that's out there.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think if he lived longer, he'd have some really just cutting edge stuff. I mean, beyond what he already produced, he's
Oh
incredible.
yeah. Yeah. What's also incredible to me about Hendrix, and I don't want to spend too much time on Hendrix because if I go on a tangent, it's gonna be a long time. But what's amazing is that like at the time of his death, wasn't he like the highest paid live musician?
That sounds right.
Yeah, which if that's true, that's insane because he wasn't even like a pop star. Like he had one hit that like barely cracked the top 20, yet he was revered and like a huge cultural icon. Like that's wild to me.
I mean, he beat the Monkees. They were engineered to be pop stars. I mean, come on.
That's insane. Shout out of it's an incentive for my dad to listen so he can hear the monkeys brought offhand. Um, anyway, so now we're gonna get to the artist of the episode, and I have to ask this question. I didn't want to do it. It was like when I asked my friend Ashton Biggie or Tupac. I didn't want to do it, but I had to get it out of the way. I got to get out of the way, Zach. You two are the Cranberries.
I had to think about this. Um, on pure, on a just a purely musical scale, I have to say, like, I'd consider it a tie. But here's the thing. Your prior episode, if people haven't, they should listen to it. That album just being kind of like released to everybody really pissed me off. And I know that you're currently going through South Park. There's a really great episode about Bono. I'm not going to spoil it, but it paints him in a really bad light. I think it kind of tipped the scale toward the Cranberries for me, but if it weren't for those two factors, I'd say it's a total tie.
Yeah, I don't think I've explored U2's discography enough. So what I think would be fair to do would to be compare when I just was familiar with the Cranberries hits, right? And because I've always been aware of U2's hits, right? And that's tough. I feel like, yeah, I don't want to do a cop out. I guess I like will slightly lean towards U2, because I think there's like maybe a little bit more cohesion, if you will. But man, they're both fantastic bands.
They really are.
They represent Ireland fantastically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially early YouTube. I mean, it's a little more hard. It's not as poppy. I like punk a lot. I think they kind of veer toward that
Yeah.
kind of stuff more.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about it later. But I know people compare Sunday Bloody Sunday with Zombie, which I kind of think is unfair. Like I get it, but um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally a fair comparison. I think that that's probably a really, I mean, especially given the historical context when they're recording, I mean, it's definitely very logical that those be compared.
yeah. But again, I not as familiar with U2 as I should be. But so back to the Cranberries now. When did you hear them for the first time?
So when you sent me maybe it's a bit inside baseball, but you sent me kind of a list of bands or topics we can explore. And when I saw the Cranberries, my heart kind of skipped a beat. Um, I actually consider them, particularly the song Zombie, to be probably the most influential song on me as a musician in total. My guitar teacher, when I was 12 years old, gave me the chords to Zombie to practice. I was just starting out, and he had like he basically record himself playing and then have the studio version. It'd be transposed, so it meets like just like normal standard tuning. And when I heard it for the first time, I was blown away. I practiced it like a madman. It's the first song I just committed to learning and getting perfectly, within the context of being like an amateur guitar player, and tried singing it for the first time. So it really kicked off the obsession with trying to actually play music for me. Before that, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of like, guitar's okay. But that really changed it for me.
Wow. Do you remember I can't, I apologize if you already told me, but do you remember like how old you were?
Age 12. Yeah.
12. That's right. That's insane. I feel like that's such an important age for, up and coming musicians because like that was when I started like playing guitar and I would say like probably of my favorite bands, a very like wide percentage of them I started getting into at the age of 12.
Absolutely. I think you
And
start having your own opinions. Oh, go on. Sorry.
oh no, no, go ahead.
Oh, I think you start having your own opinions, your own taste around that age. So that's really like the formative time for your sort of taste, its first go without your parents influencing it.
Well, it's also that I think that it's like the first time when you discover something and you're like, no one else has ever thought about this before. I am right. My so it's like for me, it was like my taste in music is perfect. My tastes are better than yours, and what I listen to is the greatest thing that has ever happened.
The hipster.
The hipster. Yeah, I guess I was destined to go to New College. Um, but I was thinking about this a lot. I was like, man, how would I describe their sound? And I feel like I have a pretty good idea, and I talk about it in the monologue. But for you, like, how would you describe their sound?
Yeah. I hate to resort to like cliches, but I think jangle pop is a really good description. I think they're definitely in the veins of the Smiths, which makes sense given their producer. Um, they have a lot of really sort of bright guitar tones, but at the same time, they have this cool sort of injection of yodeling and like Celtic sounds to it as well, given shouting out the Irish influence.
Hmm.
So I think they're a really unique band. They're building on a lot of sort of the 80s post-punk stuff, but they really develop their own sound as well, based on the Irish influence.
Definitely, that was beautiful, Zach. You should have written the monologue. I was like, damn. I was like, I feel like I was like describing the terms that you just gave, and I was like, damn, I could have just used those terms. But whatever, it's all good.
Well, my question,
Uh,
I had a problem with it because I thought like jangle pop is sort of like it's sort of a cop out sort of description of music because it's literally just like, yeah, it's jangly. Like the Birds are jangle pop, I guess,
Yeah,
technically.
I described them, and I didn't really know the right way to do it. I just described them as ethereal indie pop. That was probably the best description that I could have for them. But then again, they also ventured into other genres, right? I mean, like, and I talk about this in the monologue, but like, Zombie is one of the all-time great grunge songs, and the Cranberries are certainly not a grunge band, you
Yeah.
know. So I think like at their core, I would say, right, jangle pop or whatever the fuck I just used to describe them, but they certainly were not like one-dimensional with their genres.
Yeah, I think especially after their second album, they really took a departure. I think the first album was definitely more, I mean, I we can get more into it later, I guess, but definitely more Smiths influenced, and that sort of became its own sort of style, I think. after
Yeah,
this
I
one.
noticed, and because just kind of reading at least the origins, I think their two biggest influences were the Smiths and the Cure. And
Mhm.
as I think, we've talked a lot about, I love the Cure. They're my favorite 80s band. So I definitely, there was a lot of times that I heard the Cure's influence. Like, did you notice that, or did you think it's like more the Smiths?
I'd say I'm going to split the difference here. I think that maybe from a lyrical standpoint, it reminded me more of The Cure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of like kind of Smith's sappiness in their lyrics too, but I think that instrumentally they're more like the Smiths, but maybe lyrically they kind of veer toward The Cure instead. But they definitely, I mean, they definitely wear those two influences on their sleeves pretty
Oh,
well.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I made a statement in the monologue that I need to be scolded for. So I'm going to tell you what that was in a little bit. Okay. But it is kind of going back to what we were just talking about. But my next question is of their albums, right? Now, I don't know if you listen to any of their albums in the 2000s. I didn't really, except for their last album they put out right after Dolores O'Riordan died. But which of their albums would you say is your favorite?
Yeah, I had the same approach as you. I think my favorite album is actually probably their first one. Everybody else is doing it, so why can't we? I think that they had a lot of iconic stuff from their second album, but I really think that just from a personal aesthetic standpoint, I think I found that more of like that Smith's kind of sound, that jangly sound. I think that was more encapsulated on their first album, so it's my personal favorite. Definitely, you can see a lot of influence on like future indie bands in that particular album, I would say. How about you? What was your favorite, would you say?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm trying to think of it. It's like, oh, it'd be nice if I would have thought of answers to my own questions, but for me, this is tough. I would say because I'm a big like I'm gonna make an analogy real quick. It's like Kendrick Lamar, right? I my favorite album by him is Damn, and because I think it's just such a cohesive album, right? It blends together so well, and I love that. But I obviously know that like there are like a larger amount of superior songs on Good Kid, Mad City. So I think that's kind of how I feel about the Cranberries. Like I would probably say No Need to Argue. Um, I guess would be yeah, I would say Everybody Else Is Doing It, so why can't we is my favorite because I think like as a cohesive unit, I think it is superior. But I think that like if I can pick out like there's more songs on No Need to Argue that I prefer over their debut, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And in fact, I mean it's probably a tie between the two of them.
Yeah.
Because you'd argue, I mean, has Zombie on it, has tons of iconic stuff on it as well. So I mean, I could respect either choice between those two. I think it's a matter of just like sort of like the what they call like the narcissism of small differences eventually. Like they're both really good.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're both fantastic records. And it was really interesting to me. So, I was aware that the Cranberries put out No Need to Argue in 1994 when I did my third episode, which is I would say probably my favorite episode that I did just because I wrote like 25 pages. I put way too much work into it. But I remember when I was doing that, I was like, oh, the Cranberries had an album in 1994. And I look at the reviews, and the reviews were like, they were mixed. And I was like, oh, I guess, maybe Zombie was just like a really good song. But then but then like when I revisited it, I listened back to it and I was just confused. Like, were critics, why didn't critics not interpret it the way that I or the way that I did? Because I think it's a great record, but like a lot of people didn't feel the same way, but consumers did. So what's the disconnect here? What am I missing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, what did the critics actually say about the album?
Um, let me pull up. I gotta pull up what I said in the monologue because there was actually something that was pretty funny that was written. Rolling Stone, there's such I don't want to talk about them right now. But they're too hard. It was so funny. So they were very critical over their second and third album, which I think are both pretty good. Obviously, the second album's great. And then Bury the Hatchet, which is like, kind of mid in my opinion. They like wrote such a nice review. I'm like, dude, guys, what are you doing? But let me find it. Um, all right, he said, this is what he said. He likened the album to tea steeped too long or a porter gone sour. And
That's Oof.
Like Rolling Stone, like, what are you gonna do with them? Um, but but yeah, so I think that critics were too hard on that album.
Yeah, I apologize for cursing to your students and their parents, but that's some fart sniffing bullshit if I ever heard it.
No comment.
Fair enough.
So are and I just mentioned a couple of the later albums. Are there any of their later albums that approximate the quality of their first two? Do you think?
Okay, it's really funny you said that. I wouldn't say it approximates necessarily, but I would say I actually did enjoy Bury the Hatchet. I thought there were a couple of pretty good songs on it. Animal Instincts was good, Just My Imagination, Promises. I wouldn't say it's comparable, but I would say that, I mean, I liked a lot of the guitar work. I thought that some of the instrumental bits were quite good. I'm pretty sure there was a theremin busted out in one of the songs, which I mean that's a
There was a what?
theremin.
What is that?
So you know, like the instrument in Good Vibrations, that doo doo doo
Yeah,
doo,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
Okay.
thing. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of a sucker for that. What can I say? Fall for gimmicks. So yeah, I thought the instrumental bits were really good in it. I thought they had a lot of good interludes. I was a fan of it. I thought it had some good songs on it. They don't necessarily compare, but you know, it was a good listen.
Yeah, I would say that I do slightly prefer Bury the Hatchet over To the Faithful Departed. But I think maybe I was being a little facetious when I called it mid because I do think that it's I can't remember the name of the well Benedict Fenner who produced it. I thought he did a really good job in kind of taking their like rock side and taking their more like their jangle pop side as you mentioned and kind of bringing it together a little bit and finding common ground between the two. So yeah, I definitely thought it was. I mean, there was nothing that I listened to by the Cranberries when I was researching them. I was like, this is not good. Everything I thought was quality, but I agree with you that I wouldn't say Bury the Hatchet or To the Faithful Departed come near the quality of their first two albums.
Yeah, I think it's totally fair. Yeah, and I don't know about you, like I was definitely more familiar with their early work. So uh it wasn't like a chore to listen to the later albums, but I still feel like, you know, you wouldn't normally gravitate toward it. And I say later albums like Bury the Hatchet was 1999. It's not like that much later, but still like I really
Right.
concentrated in their earliest albums.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But also it's like, I had never heard and before, researching this podcast, I had never heard any song that came after No Need to Argue. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? But like looking it up, apparently a bunch of them were big hits, even in the US. Like they had, I think on To the Faithful Departed, they had two top 40 hits, and then they even had one song that was like a number one rock song. So like they obviously there were big hits off of that. They just haven't stood the test of time like A Linger or Dreams, etc.
Yeah, I definitely. The one weird one was they had what was it, Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac. They had a cover of that.
They did.
Yeah.
We're not Zach. We're not talking about Fleetwood Mac because that's going to go down a rabbit hole. We're not doing it. Still, Silver Springs is living rent free in my head.
Hell yeah.
Um, but by the way, I have showed like 15 people that video since you left.
Everyone should see it.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. We're gonna talk about that in a future episode, but the little tease right there. Um, so I know we've talked about their albums, but what are some of your favorite songs by the Cranberries?
Got my list right here. Okay. So absolute favorite
Don't
song.
don't be don't be super hipster about this. Give me hits. Give me hits.
Oh no, they're hits. They're hits. I mean, I felt
Okay.
so sick doing it. Um, I love Dreams. I think it's a great song.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
my only quibble is between like the original recording and their acoustic recording of it. They're both beautiful songs, incredible lyrics. I love the weird like yodely breakdown at the end of the song. It has the pop sensibilities and then it kind of devolves in this weird like I don't know like 90s nonsense where they're all yelling at each other. It's incredible. So Dreams. After that, Zombie, as I mentioned, very influential for me. Linger is a great song. So already they're like the three like most famous songs, like super basic. And after that, I'd
Yeah, but
say
they're
Emily.
so good.
Oh, they're incredible. Yeah, I mean it's just incredible songwriting. Just the instrumentation is so clean. It's great. After that, I'd say Animal Instinct off of Bury the Hatchet, and then probably Sunday. So kind of a mixture of, I mean, it's all 90s songs by them for sure, but definitely between their first and second albums mostly, plus one from Bury the Hatchet.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. I feel like, on their debut album, definitely the hits like Linger, Dreams, and Sunday. Dreams was, and I talk about this on the monologue as well, but that was the only song that before I like became aware of the band, the Cranberries. Like I remember hearing that like 3, 4 years old, like in the car with my mom.
It's
And
a
I love that song. I just think it's just one of the most sonically pleasant songs I've ever heard. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's one of those songs. It's like "Kiss Me" by Sixpence None the Richer. Just gives me the feels.
Oh, they're definitely very similar songs. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, like it was kind of partially ruined for me by the movie Click. If you remember that.
You're not going to talk shit about Adam Sandler on my podcast, by the way.
Not him, just the movie, just the
Oh,
movie.
okay, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, but otherwise, incredible song. Yeah, for sure. I love Linger.
I'm trying to look. I'm trying to think of my favorite. Let's see, the To the Faithful Departed, because there's definitely a few songs on that. I was like, okay, I like Free to Decide a lot, and critics shitted on it, but I liked Salvation. I think Salvation's a good song.
Yeah,
Um, I Shot John Lennon is terrible. That's not a good song.
it's a very provocative song title. And like when I see stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll like it. And then you listen to it and you're like, oh,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. From Bury the Hatchet, yeah, Animal Instinct's great, beautiful meaning of the song. Promises, like you said, is great. But yeah, I'm like, there's nothing really Bury the Hatchet I feel that like is really gonna stay with me other than I'd probably say Animal Instinct and Promises. But and then I want to say the other one, but that's the signature song, so we're gonna talk about that in a little bit.
Uh,
Um, but it's another tease. It's another tease. Um, what are your thoughts? People always talk about Dolores, and she's amazing. We'll talk about her in a second. But what are your thoughts on Noel Hogan?
yeah. I think he's a bit of a sleeper in terms of guitarist. I mean, if you listen to his stuff, he has a very dynamic sound. I know we've like used the term jingle pop like umpteen times. It's kind of like overwhelming at this point, but at the same time, like the the tone of his guitar cuts through so well. But at the same time, you see the dynamism there because I mean, okay, for Zombie, he has like a really kind of heavy chord progression. It's a lot more forceful. His acoustic guitar work, his rhythm guitar work from that is incredible as well. It really drives a lot of songs. I mean, he's a fantastic guitarist, and it's kind of sad he isn't really recognized for it more. But I was really blown away by it. I think it really drives the band aside from Dolores.
And a great songwriter too. I mean, I know he wasn't a lyricist, but his compositions, because Dolores kind of took over, the all of the songwriting, not all of it, but the vast majority on To the Faithful Departed, and I think that it was noticeable that the lessening in quality of the songwriting on their third album, because on the first two albums, there was that I think like 64% of the songs were co-written by the two. So I think he's an amazing songwriter in addition to, like you said, just like being a super dynamic guitar player. And going through and listening to the anthology, the way that he would layer the guitar work really, like you said, it's a sleeper. Like people don't really talk about it. But he really was very, very talented.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a really nice sort of mutual respect between Dolores and really the rest of the band. I don't want to just say Noel because, you know, reading through some of her concerns about the production, she was always concerned that she would be overpowering the instrumentation. But at the same time, I mean, the band was very conscientious of letting the vocals kind of shine. So I think there's also sort of a humility in that too, where, he knew when to sort of back down a little bit, whereas Dolores did as well. And like I said, I mean, some of their instrumentation is just fantastic. So absolutely, I think he's a great guitarist. He definitely has some of that sort of Johnny Marr sound to him, but he has his own sort of touch to it as well. I think he's very conscientious of the entirety of his song and not just like, his own instrument.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of and I know that I've mainly even in the monologue just kind of talk most about Dolores and Noel, but I think that like the bassist Mike Hogan and the drummer Fergal Lawler, like they're it's not even that they're like I can't even say that they're brilliant musicians because they don't showcase it, and the reason they don't showcase it is because they just kind of want to accentuate the brilliance of those other two members, and because they know like they just want to benefit the song and the band as you know best as best possible. And I think that's like really, it's a really important thing that like when we talk about the quality of musicians, we kind of look for the shiny objects, but we don't look about like we don't look necessarily at like just the overall contributions of the instrumentalists. So I think that they really they're underrated because they're reserved, but they're reserved for a reason, and it just benefits everyone really.
Yeah, I utterly agree. Yeah, I mean, really, all great musicians, all great songwriters. I mean, it just meshes so well. I mean, that makes their song so great.
Absolutely. So, all right. So before I ask you this next question, I'm going to tell you the hot take that I made that you're going to be mad at me and you need to yell at me because it was bad what I said. I
This is like,
said I don't think Dolores O'Riordan is a good lyricist. Please yell at me.
okay, um, it's very hit or miss. I'll give you that. I want to yell at you. I was really relishing the opportunity to yell at you, but I kind of agree. I mean, I think in the same way, like I think that like Dreams has fantastic lyrics. I think that Zombie has fantastic lyrics. A couple of them, maybe she could have maybe not repeated as many lines as much. So I'll actually give you that. I don't really have much of a fight to give you, except for maybe a couple of key songs.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that her lyrics are very heartfelt. I'll give her that. But just like in the overall quality, I'm like, wow, I like, like you said, like I always found Zombie to be a very well written song lyrically, and I still hold that opinion. And that was one of the few songs that I knew of them before researching them. So I assumed that the lyrical quality would be of that for the remainder of their discography, and that obviously was not the case. So that maybe it was just that juxtaposition between Zombie and the rest of their lyrics, but no, I was just not. Overall, it was a net negative for me.
Yeah,
Um,
think it's fair for sure. There's like
uh,
one.
yeah, I but now that I've made a blasphemous comment, we'll talk about her as a singer because I think you and I can both agree she's fantastic. But what do you think makes her so special? Because I really do think that she is a unique and special talent.
Yeah, I hate to say this because it sounds frankly kind of cringe. But I think that she actually was kind of a brave individual, in terms of maybe how she approached her songwriting. Even in, I mean, granted, some of them are pretty ridiculous lyrics, but especially for Zombie, I think that if you see her, especially her stage presence, like she seems like maybe like kind of a sort of meek individual. She's kind of small. People are always commenting on her size. Um, but I mean, especially for Zombie, I mean, writing a song like that, huge anti-war, anti-violence message, during a time when, frankly, in Ireland, it probably wasn't very popular to voice that opinion. I think she deserves a lot of credit. She had a lot of really adventurous approaches to her vocal style. Um, she had a huge range, but on top of that, she would introduce just these weird elements, like the kind of grunting sounds in Zombies. She did like yodeling, which is like you wouldn't expect that at all in a song. Um, I think that she really ventured out there, and it's almost unfair sometimes to say that they're just like in the vein of the Smiths or The Cure, because I think her vocal style really distinguished her from that stuff because she did a lot of really risky approaches to singing as well.
Yeah, you know how much I love the Cure and the Smiths, but like, um, but her vocals I just think are far superior to Morrissey and Robert Smith. You know what I mean? I guess you can like more compare the instrumentalists and just the quality of the songwriting, but like, I think she's a far superior singer than those two guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I mean, I don't know how much you delve into her, um, biography maybe like in the monologue, but I mean there's a lot of pain behind that too.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and I think it really comes out in a way where I mean, you feel it, you know. And like I said, I mean, I once again, it's kind of cringe to say, but like you just can't help but kind of sympathize with her as a character.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was, and I really think she was just kind of like wrong place at the wrong time. You know, she was the face of this very popular band in the early 90s as a woman. And I think that like she experienced kind of like the paparazzi or, you know, the media like Britney Spears did, you know. And on top of that, they were like, you know, they were touring constantly. They were either touring or in the studio. They never had a break. And she really had a lot of like, she had a lot of issues because of that, things that the rest of the band didn't have to deal with. So you know, there's a lot of moving parts there for sure. And so I really like your description of her as brave because she was brave. She put, you know, I never doubted her sincerity. And whether it was her singing or her writing or just like the way that she communicated with the media. So yeah, kudos to Dolores.
Absolutely. One more thing to bring up real quick. I personally love this in a lot of artists. And they happen to be kind of more like lost to history sort of artists. Like, for example, the Kinks, you know, they got tons of shit when they were playing in the 60s because, you know, the Davies brothers were very into like accentuating their English accents. And it's kind of funny, fast forward to the Cranberries, and Dolores is getting it for her Irish accent, and she owned it. She got tons of shit from producers, from people who were listening, saying, "Don't, you know, just like try to kind of normalize your voice." And she's like, "No, I'm going to present it in the way I actually am, where I'm from." Um, and I think that she also had a really great impact on sort of advocating for Irish music,
Well,
Irish art.
absolutely. And there's such an element of Irish folk in their music. And I think that that's one of those things that differentiates them from a lot of other of their contemporaries across the Western world is just like their, you know, how unabashedly they inserted you know, Irish folk tunes. Not folk tunes, but Irish folk like influence.
Oh, definitely, absolutely.
And so speaking of our friend Dolores, where do you think she ranks amongst the all-time great female rock singers?
Okay, I'm in a list of five. Um,
Go for it.
Actually, I'm gonna say six. One's a tie. Um, Go ahead and call me out if you don't think I'm right. Uh, I'd say one Stevie Nicks. I'm biased. Um, just
Why
whatever.
are you keep trying to get me to talk about that Silver Springs video, Zach? I don't get it. Okay. You
Oh
know I
man.
want to. Why are you doing this to me? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Proceed.
You're all good, man. So yeah, one Stevie Nicks. I'm just biased. I'm not gonna deny it. After that, probably Janis Joplin. Incredible voice. Uh, Number three spot's a tie between Bonnie Raitt and Patti Smith, who I just happen to love. I'd say four is Dolores actually. And it's no knock to her. I mean, that's a pretty formidable list of people to contend with. I think she owned her own style, just like the other, four people I mentioned. And then I'd actually say this is maybe a hot take, but I actually say Miley Cyrus for number five. I
All
get
right,
pop.
and this episode's over. This was a nice episode, Zach. You did a very nice job, but I'm sorry I have to cut our time short.
Have you listened to her recent
No,
stuff
no,
though?
I'm just being I'm just being a little silly. No, no, no. It's a totally fair. She's very talented. I haven't really dived into anything that she's done, so yeah.
Uh, she's played with Billy Idol. I mean, she's kind of transitioned to rock music, so I think like
Really,
absolutely.
is there an album that you would recommend checking out by her to kind of really, you know, hear that rock vocal for of her?
I think Plastic Hearts as a song is really good for it, but I think mostly she tends to draw out a lot of the rock influence in her live performances. If you just like Google, some of her performances or go on YouTube, especially when she's doing duets with like Billy Idol or other rock stars, I mean, it's totally she's got a great rock voice as
Yeah.
well. No, I wouldn't say it good.
Yeah, so I think that your list is pretty good. I don't really have them ordered, so I'm not really going to do that. But I would say if I'm doing a top five, I would probably obviously Stevie Nicks is going to be on that list. Dolores as well. Janis Joplin, um, Grace Slick
Mm.
of Jefferson Airplane, and you know, I guess this is not to cater to the Gen Z folks, But Haley Williams as well, I probably would put her there just because of, what I think she's a great singer and what she's meant to the pop punk scene and the emo pop punk scene is pretty incredible.
Oh, don't tell Brianna. She loves Paramore. Yeah, she's also a great vocalist for sure.
Brianna is Zach's girlfriend, by the way. Not, yeah, just wanted to, so people knew. They're like, who's Brianna? Um, anyways, so why do you think the Cranberries? Now, the reason that I did this episode is because I noticed that the Cranberries I think at the time was like 24 million monthly listeners on Spotify, which is an incredible amount. That's even more than Creed, and you know how we feel about Creed. Um, so my
How,
question to you
how do
is
we feel about Creed?
what's that?
How do we feel about Creed?
We love Creed. Creed is coming to Atlanta December 4th, and I'm trying to get Ryan to go with me so we can do an episode about it. Actually, no, who cares about the episode? I just want to go see Creed. But anyways, why do you think the Cranberries still remain the household name that they are?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I had to think about that for a second. I think that they are quite versatile. I think that they have a lot of the pop sensibilities, I think just the melodies of all their songs are pretty widely appealing. I don't know about you. I mean, you grew up in the South mostly. I cannot tell you how many times in a Publix I heard either Linger or Dreams playing on their loudspeaker. I mean, all the damn time.
Yeah, I don't know when I first started hearing Linger, but I know that like Dreams, like I said, that's on the soundtrack of my childhood. So I probably heard it in Publix a million times.
Yeah, they really love stuff like that. So I think it definitely appeals in that sense. There's a lot of melodic appeal to it. They definitely have the pop sensibilities, but at the same time, I mean, the contrast is Zombie, and I think that's probably one of the most widely covered songs in rock. I mean, like you said, it's an iconic grunge song. I think that if you go to any bar, I mean, that one's going to get tons of applause. I just think they have a very wide-ranging appeal. It speaks to their ability to kind of write across very different musical styles. So, yeah, I think that they're going to continue for that reason. I don't think people are going to know the names of the Cranberries necessarily. Like, I don't think that they're going to like people are going to like identify the band playing it, but I just think like that they have earworm songs.
Yeah, it's the songs. And I think those big three that we talked a lot about Dreams, Linger, and Zombie. I think those songs will live. I think those songs will outlive the name the Cranberries. They've kind of taken off their own life, and I think it does go back to what you said of just how diverse, the songs are.
Mhm.
It's not like the Chili Peppers that have like 10 funk rock hits and then they have Under the Bridge. It's like, oh, okay, the Chili Peppers kind of did like a ballad. It's like, no, 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 no. The Cranberries just like there's such diversity of their hits. Like even if there's a lot of overlap, there's such unique characteristics that really differentiate them and kind of gives each individual track like recognition and their own life for consumers to really indulge in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So now this is, the moment we've all been waiting for. First, before I ask you the $1 million question, how would you define a signature song?
Okay, yeah, I had to test this with Brianna because I wasn't sure. I thought about it first. I have three criteria. uh, I think the first one is especially because this is like a decades podcast, it has to capture something about the cultural zeitgeist of the time. So for an example that's not from the 90s, I would say like All Along the Watchtower, the Hendrix version for the 60s, early 70s as well. Um, I think after that, it'd have to showcase sort of the best sides of the artist's overall lyrics. So maybe it draws in all of the best attributes of different songs by them. And finally, it has to have like a knee-jerk response from the audience. So, for example, when you think Kanye West, you think Gold Digger almost immediately. So I think those three things have.
I think that Scoopity Poop song. That's what I think when I hear Kanye. Sorry. Sorry, you cut out. You good? You there?
I'm here now. Where did I cut out from?
I said because you said that I made a joke. You said you think when you hear Kanye, you think of Gold Digger, and I said actually I think of the Scoopity Poop song.
That's a close second.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
that's
I'm my
masochicism.
apologies. Please continue.
No, no, I think that's it. So I think those three things in combination would do it. I don't think it's just like one thing. I think especially when we think of in terms of like maybe in decades, I think that really capturing the moment that the artist is recording is super fucking important. So I'd probably say I'd give a lot of importance to number one, that zeitgeist thing, but the two and three are very important as well, for sure.
Gotcha. So with all that said, what do you consider the Cranberry signature song?
I think you know already.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say Dreams. Yeah, I think it's absolutely
Okay.
yeah. Zombie was a close second. I just think that it captures like the vocal layering, kind of an optimism also from the era they were recording in the 90s. And I just think that it also has an element of weirdness. Like I said, I love that breakdown at the end where they're all like basically yodeling over each other.
Yeah.
It's just super weird. It's super poppy. I mean, it's all the right things. I mean, it could be made in a lab for God's sake. It's so great.
Yeah. I mean, it is cool how you have like this pop song that is, transcended generations and there's fucking yodeling in the goddamn bridge. Like that's pretty wild. Like even Alanis Morissette, like, she did the yodeling as well and probably was influenced by Dolores O'Riordan. But like, I don't really it's not like you hear that on You Ought to Know.
Yeah.
Although and I guess you kind of do. But I don't think not as emphatically on Dreams. So I mean that's like commendable in and of itself.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I know your choice. I disagree with it, but I
Oh,
respect
yeah, tell me. No, no. You wanted to yell at me earlier, but you couldn't. So yell at me now. So I chose "Ode to My Family," and you and I think just have different like criteria for signature song. Um, but please yell at me. Tell me why I'm wrong.
it. You know what? I can't say you're wrong. I think it's just a polite disagreement. I'm sorry. That's like definitely not very good for like driving climax. But no, I mean, I think it captures the instrumental and lyrical styles of the band really well. I think it's got really nice intimate lyrics to it. I actually have no real beef with your choice. I just don't particularly like the song. I don't really know why.
Wow, wow.
I don't know why. I mean, look, it's fine. It's just fine. But that's just my opinion, you know.
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, it has so many elements to me that are just very central to the Cranberries' identity. But I think at the same time, um, it almost like caricaturizes them. And I can see it from that point of view because it's so the Cranberries. You know what I mean? Like Dolores really puts her heart out there. She starts it with, do 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 do. You know what I mean? So I can see how that could be a little annoying. I can see that and might want to dissuade you from agreeing with me. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic song. Um, I think it's so heartfelt. And I think all the instrumentals complement each other just super well. And it is the most popular of their songs besides those big three, and I think there is a reason for that. So
Well, I think the lyrics are incredible. I think probably after Zombie, they're the best lyrics for sure of any of their songs.
yeah, I don't disagree with you, and I do talk about actually I do like the lyrics in that song.
Oh, I wanted to ask, what about, I know that you often talk about the influence of the band on other bands as
Oh
well.
yeah, 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 yeah. I totally skipped that question. My bad. Have you noticed their influence on other bands that you like or are familiar with?
I want to hear your list first.
Oh, I didn't make a list. Like I said, I didn't really think about it. The only one that I mean, I talk about it in the monologue. There's like the artists that mention that they're influenced by them. Alanis Morissette, obviously, Florence and the Machine, Foster the People, I think was another one, Arcade Fire. But other than Alanis Morissette, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head.
So I definitely had a lot of focus on Irish artists because I think that they were, I mean, like they were like one of the number one selling Irish bands. I think there's a huge influence on Hozier. I think there are a couple songs by them where I just feel like, oh my God, I mean, he's basically just like embodying sort of
With
that.
anything, because I'm not too familiar with his discography minus his first album. Is there anything off his first album um that you would say reminds you of the Cranberries or?
Yeah, I actually is his first album. I think Like Real People Do is probably a good one that embodies it pretty
Okay.
well. Um, I'd say Hozier definitely embodies it a lot. I think that they opened up a lot more accessibility to Irish artists. And it's funny because as I was going through it, I could only think of male singers actually that I could feel that there's like a direct influence on. I know you mentioned Lance Morissette, but I think aside from that, I think you mostly mentioned male singers as well. One that I thought when listening to them was the Shins. I think the Shins probably drew a lot from them as well. In some of their,
Yeah, that checks out for sure.
yeah, definitely the kind of yodely thing. But I think that also on top of that, like Dolores kind of captured sort of like she was kind of iconic in the sense that she had like the fashion and style that we kind of saw, especially when we were like teenagers. You saw sort of the, and I apologize, it's kind of a derogatory term, but like manic pixie dream girl sort of thing, like the short hair and the kind of fashion sense. I think that came through a lot in her. I think she really showed a lot of strength for women as well, you know, as frontmen. So, um, yeah, I think that they kind of had a dual sort of influence on both music as well as like maybe like sort of a gender influence, especially on fashion and style.
Interesting, super interesting. I never even thought of like that side of them. But it makes sense. I mean, they really were a cultural phenomenon, especially with those first two albums.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Um, but anyways, Zach, you exceeded my expectations. You were absolutely fantastic. And can you please do the show again?
I will absolutely do it. All I ask is that we do the Black Crows at some point.
They're in Atlanta. Are they an Atlanta band, or am I making that up?
They might be. They're a Southern rock band. I think you like them a lot, though.
I do like the Black Rose. I need to get more into them because I only know like their big hits.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. If you want to have me back on, it'd be an absolute pleasure. It's
But,
fantastic doing
but you
that.
said you also do the Tribe episode, right? Tribe
I
Called
will.
Quest.
I'm also like a middle class white guy, so like I feel like it's like just a stereotype at this point. But if you need
Fair.
someone, I'm available. It's okay.
All right, man. Thank you so much. Much love.
All right, thanks, Dev. Been a
All right.
pleasure.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Thanks, y'all, so much for listening, and a special thanks to Zach Natale for being perhaps our most intellectual guest. Don't forget to check out the podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Anyways, have a great rest of your day, and whatever it brings, hopefully music is involved. Again, I'm Dove Brenner, and this is Hotcakes from a 90s Stand. Take care.